Welcome. My name is Bianca Collins. I'm the curator of public programs for the Fowler Museum at UCLA. Thank you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where it is you're tuning in from around the world. The Fowler is honored to present today's program with the African Art in Venice Forum as part of our Fowler Talks series. The Fowler is honored to be a convening place for conversations, lectures, and readings that explore the many ways art creates meaning and defines purpose for people across the globe. The African Art in Venice Forum, otherwise known as AAVF, is a free public platform presented in Venice, Italy during the opening week of the Venice Biennale, produced by African Art Dialogues, a not-for-profit organization registered in Italy whose members serve on a pro bono basis. The event provides opportunities to discover, learn, and discuss topics and projects related to contemporary art from Africa and its diasporas. This year, AAVF took place on April 20th and 21st, and even from across the pond, it was clear they made a pretty big splash in Venice this year. We are pleased to be joined today by my friend and AAVF founder and director, Neri Torcello, for our program moderated by AAVF board member Azza Satti, who will talk with a group of panelists who participated in this year's forum in conversations about the rise and impact of intra-African cultural cooperation, activities promoting Black history in Italy, African artists who have established foundations to support creativity and education, and women leading in the African creative sector. Azza will introduce the panelists shortly. Before we get going, I just have a few quick technical bits of housekeeping. When screen sharing begins, I encourage you to click View Options and select side-by-side mode. And if you have any questions during our program, please do submit them through the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit and upvote entries that you would like to be considered to be answered at the end of the program. All right, that's all from me. Over to you, Neri.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you to the curatorial team and direction of the Fowler Museum at UCLA for hosting this session and promoting our program as well. Hello, everyone. As Bianca was saying, I am Neri Torcello, the founder of the first edition of the African Art in Venice Forum and co-founder of the not-for-profit organization that is now managing it, African Art Dialogues, together with 6 amazing people. Azza Satti and Ilaria Conti, who are here with me today, but also Georgiana Wordbutt, Alexandra Topalski, Attilio Meoli, and Lupo Geronazzo-Alman. I will try to give you all a sense of the reasons why the African Art in Venice Forum came into existence and why it is, and we hope it will be in the years to come, a vital tool for a more inclusive and participative creative dialogue on a global level. The Biennale Internazionale dell'Arte di Venezia, as you may already know, was born in 1895 in the middle of the scramble for Africa and the new imperialism. So it is reasonable to think that it included in its first editions only most of the so-called Western countries and excluded all those that were colonies. With the later exceptions of some exhibits of African tribal artifacts that were more connected to exoticism than to honoring them as pieces of art representing a people. Throughout the years, the Biennale maintained a structure based on national pavilions. And national pavilions participation at the Biennale requires approval from the Ministry of Culture or equivalent institution of the participating country. At the same time, though, a central pavilion in the Biennale allows the main curator of the Biennale itself to host cross-border narratives and include artists from otherwise not participating countries. Now, regardless of decolonization and existence of this central non-national pavilion, African countries are still underrepresented. And this is due to a mix of reasons that are not necessarily imputable to the Biennale itself. The AAVF was born in 2017 from the urgency to compensate for the lack of representation of African countries at the Venice Biennial. And it was started with the awareness of the historical reasons that brought that situation. At the same time, not failing to recognize that something could be done. And that was something relatively inexpensive and logistically feasible, features that we know are vital for sustainability. So the African Art in Venice Forum is now a well-known and recurring event, we could say, in its third edition, a platform for African art narratives to be presented to the world and a more inclusive dialogue to be promoted. The structure of the AAVF, which is based on content partnerships, allows a multiplicity of voices and perspectives to be heard and presented. Furthermore, our Screen Insights program, of which the Fowler Museum at UCLA is part of this year, allows organizations around the world to promote accessibility to an otherwise distant event, facilitate local community interaction and awareness on the topics that are discussed at the African Art in Venice Forum, and allow screening partners actually to develop collateral events based on our free content. I like to compare what I see happening nowadays during the Venice Biennale to the undersea life inhabiting the shipwreck of an epoch, a marine ecosystem where the past offers plenty of nourishment to most kind of symbiosis and interdependencies. In this picture, the AAVF is one of those safe spaces that one can find within the already safer sunken ship. A protected niche for new life and creativity to digest the course of history. Specifically, the AAVF presents new narratives from the African continent and its diaspora. And it is there as an invitation to be part of a more inclusive creative dialogue. Representation, in fact, becomes a complex matter when seen through the lenses of the national pavilion structure of the Venice Biennale. The rich fragmentation of the creative dialogue in one country and its dynamics of influence and interdependence cannot be easily represented by a single narrative without losing important complexity. So the risk of misrepresentation is around the corner for many. Sometimes it may come from corruption, power balances, and unjust distribution of resources, while some others can come from the inability of certain promoters or curators to represent diversity and address social issues that are specific to the people we aim to find representation for. But let me also say that the Biennale Internazionale dell'Arte di Venezia is also an important, more than anything, is an important stage offering an opportunity for a multiplicity of artistic narratives to be presented and heard. And as the Biennale is perceived by its audience as a global platform, accessibility and representation become even more vital to promote an inclusive creative dialogue in a just society. The African Art in Venice Forum, AAVF, with its discursive and content partnership-based format, is an agile platform to allow this to happen, exactly when the hearts of those sensitive to artistic expression are tuned in to the frequencies of the Venice Biennale. So allow me to finish with a 1-minute video to show you what the AAVF looks like when you are in Venice, so that you can all get ready to join us in 2024. And the voice over that video that you will see is from Skinder Rundle, director at British Council Arts, who was part of our opening remarks. Thank you.
You know, it's always wonderful to be in one of the most beautiful cities that have been man-made in the world. This juxtaposition of this forum, this intracontinental moment of solidarity and bringing art and culture together is indeed a special moment. And this city, you know, is a city of water, a city of bridges, many islands. There's 400 bridges, by the way, that's incredible. And we're building bridges here. The African Art in Venice Forum in its third edition. This is a great moment. It means it is positioning itself as one of the key centres of gravity in the discourse within African contemporary visual arts, culture and expressionism. Of course, it is not the only one. There is much happening worldwide, and I know in the UK we are on a real big roller coaster right now. But it is a forum curated with focus within the magic of an international biennale of huge proportions in an inspiring space and place. The very room we are in, for example.
Hello, thank you very much, Neri. Hello, everyone. As Bianca mentioned, I am Azza Satti. I am the founding board member of African Art in Venice Forum, as well as African Dialogues. This morning, we are joined by the following speakers. Justin Randolph Thompson is an artist, cultural facilitator, and educator based between Italy and the US since 1999. Thompson is co-founder and director of Black History Month Florence and the Recovery Plan, a multifaceted exploration of Black histories and cultures in the context of Italy, founded in 2016. We're also joined this morning by Anna-Alix Koffi. She's a creative director and photo editor of Something We Africans Got. She's born in Abidjan and raised in Paris. Anna-Alix has several projects related to photography and contemporary art between France and the continent. She's now working on Something We Africans Got, a quarterly journal about arts and critical thinking from Africa. The next panelist we have the pleasure to be amongst is she's a South African visual artist living and working in Johannesburg. She's working primarily with photography. She incorporates sculpture, performance, installation, and film in her creative practice. She's currently exhibiting in the South African Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And last but not least, my colleague, Ilaria Conti, the Vice President and one of the co-founders of African Dialogues and the Africa Art in Venice Forum. Ilaria is a New York-based curator. She has served, among other positions, as research curator at the Centre Pompidou, was part of the curatorial team of the 2016 Marrakesh Biennale. She has curated projects across several countries in collaboration with organizations such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Guggenheim Museum, and the Swiss Institute. I would like to pass on the mic to my colleague, Ilaria, for her to share a summary of the events and conversations that took place at the Africa Art in Venice last week.
Thank you very much, Azza, and also, again, many thanks to the Fowler Museum, many thanks to Bianca Collins for the invitation. I would like to begin by taking the cue from what Neri was discussing and really start by emphasizing that collaboration sits at the very heart of the forum because this is always organized since its very first edition with numerous content partners that contribute topics, but also bring to the space of Venice several speakers. And this is a very important characteristic because it's really what allows to cultivate a polyphonic approach where the forum really serves as a platform, which is to say, as the infrastructure that allows for people to gather and conversations to take place communally. So because of the isolation and the challenges posed by the pandemic, for this year's edition of the forum, we decided to enhance our focus on collaboration through panels that addressed this notion specifically, both within the African continent and also across different regions and several contexts. So in terms of looking back at what the forum was, I would say that approximately half of the panels of the forum focused on this topic of collaboration. And a key highlight to this approach was the opening panel of the forum, which focused on issues of restitution with speakers such as the director of the National Gallery of Benin, but also focused on how the process of restituting artifacts speaks to contemporary art and also informs the thinking of living artists. And this is something that was addressed by panelists such as Silvia Forni, who's a curator at the Royal Ontario Museum, and Alicia Nock, a curator at the Pompidou Center in Paris. Other panels that focused on this notion of collaboration addressed artist-led initiatives in the African continent, and this is a panel that Alex will discuss in a bit, but also how to think about collaboration through the cultivation of the infrastructure of the contemporary art field as a whole, and also how nonprofit and for-profit actors can contribute to this infrastructural development by creating alliances and projects. Now, another key aspect that is truly central to the mission of the forum, and that I think is of paramount importance to highlight, is that it serves as a platform for artists, for them to feature their work and have conversations, because their practice is ultimately the reason for which I guess we all work in this field. So in this regard, the other half of the panels of this year's forum, I would say, provide a room for conversations on artists and among artists. So one panel was a focused conversation with artists working and living in Ethiopia, for instance. And this was part of an ongoing series that allows the forum to focus on a different country during each edition of the forum. So for instance, in 2019, we presented a focused panel on Sudan. Similarly, another panel focused on women artists and how transformative their practice and thinking is for the field at large. And again, I know Lebohang will share more on this in a bit. Other panels engaged again with artists, but with artists that work in or in relation to Italy, which is ultimately the context in which the forum takes place, and one that we think is very important to keep present in our minds and also in our programming. And so among the panels presented in this context, besides the one that Justin will address in a little bit, one featured the work of Muna Mousse, an Eritrean artist based in Bologna, and the project that she recently presented for the Biennale of Democracy in Turin, while another one hosted a conversation organized by the London-based curatorial project Ashiko, which focused on photography and how this is used by young artists as a tool to reshape individual and collective memories and identities. And so I think that such broad spectrum of partners and topics also reflects the spectrum of speakers, but most importantly also of publics that engage with the forum. And in this sense, I want to flag that this year, we were really thrilled that despite the limits that the pandemic is still posing to many of us, the forum managed to welcome once again almost 1,000 people between members of the public and people following the panels through live stream and through the screening site partners, through speakers, and also through guests that participated in our special events. So it is, I think, very important to stress how wonderful it is to observe how the communities that the forum catalyzes continue to grow, multiply, diversify with each edition, and also know that all of this is based on a genuine interest in the conversations and the exchanges that take place in the space of that the forum managed to carve out. So with that being said, I will pass it on to Justin so that we can delve deeper into the contents of some of these conversations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ilaria, for that introduction to the setting and everything. And thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation, just as I'm really happy to be a part of the African Art and Venice Forum for the second time. I am a visual artist, but really within this context, I'm representing the work that I do as the co-founder and director of Black History Month Florence initially, and then the Recovery Plan subsequently. Black History Month Florence was initiated in 2016, and I'm going to play just a little video behind as I talk that sort of goes through what the production of around 300 events that is Black History Month Florence in its first 7 editions, and the sort of sequence that led into the Recovery Plan, which is a Black Cultural Center based in Florence, based on research in relation to Afro-descendant cultural production, and then some of the research platforms that we represent. So, you know, with working within the context of African Art and Venice Forum, it's been really exciting to watch the sort of growth and the ways in which the conversations have changed. I think a lot of the things that Neri talked about and that Ilaria talked about are really crucial to us. Notions of complexity. One of the things about in the introduction and the opening words, it was mentioned that this is a very inspiring place. And I think that one of the things that's really, really important is that it's easy to go into some of these larger exhibitions and maybe forget about the cultural production that's happening within those environments because it's such an international context. And so for us, it was really central and important to make sure that there is also an anchor that's looking at the environment of Italy and the relationship that Italy has with the African continent and the relation that it's had with the African continent that goes back into antiquity, which is a lot of what our work does. Black History Month Florence had sort of morphed into first and foremost, a curatorial collective that I work together with Janine Gale-Duji in the production of a range of exhibitions. We've done around 40 exhibitions, and we've developed together a range of research platforms, as I mentioned, which you'll see sort of focused on various things. The range of things that we look at are all about wrestling with Blackness within a global context and within the local realities of Italy that need more complexity than what is attributed to them. So what does it mean to look at centuries of history and to sort of think about the impact that this history has on today? What does it mean to sort of move beyond the common narration of people of African descent within the context of Italy, which tends to link it to the past 20 years and really think about all of these centuries and their contribution to a reflection and to the development of certain cultural values. Our research platforms range from one that is called Black Archive Alliance, which was the first we developed. And that's one that was brought forth in the context of Florence, looking at archives, both public and private archives, and also rethinking what we mean when we speak to an archive in order to really bring content that's connected to the African continent in different moments and in different ways. So to bring to the surface certain narrations and to render them accessible. So it's sort of a starting point for research and some of what we attempt to do in sort of narrating things. I was really, really happy to be a part of bringing forth 3 different panels at the African Art and Venice Forum this time around, working with Muna Musie, who BHMF as a curatorial collective was a part of developing through a collaboration with the Fondazione Sandretto Re Badengo in Torino. We worked to sort of develop this public art piece that was really about also highlighting the work that we do in relation to artists of African descent who are really anchored and based in Italy. Muna Musie, who was mentioned before, is one of those. We've worked with her on a number of projects. Right now within the recovery plan, we're actually hosting a research-based exhibition that really looks at the backdrop behind what it means to be in a residency where the focus is not necessarily on production, but really on thinking, really on expanding, really on going into the archive, really in translating that. So a lot of our work with artists is really about what does it mean to transform and share the research that's being done within a setting that really fosters that. So our center is host also to a rotating library, which we call Library on Loan, where we borrow books from scholars, artists, and thinkers. And within that context, I think a lot of the work that we're doing is really about making, again, accessible these information. And I think within the context of the forum, the other panels that I was a part of, one was about really just thinking about cultural capital and sort of what it means to be developing and some of the challenges of advancing work within the context of Italy, where there are a range of institutional challenges and infrastructural challenges that we attempt to really mediate. And then lastly, we had a conversation about an exhibition that we opened just on Tuesday of this week at Palazzo Pitti, which is dedicated to the artist Semi Bologgi, and looking at the sort of horizontal exchanges that were happening in the 16th century between the Kingdom of Congo and the Kingdom of Portugal. So these are just a range of some of the things that we're really working with and what it means to sort of wrestle with these histories, bring them to the surface, talk in regards to sort of the collaborations that we have with different institutions, like in the case of the African Art and Venice Forum, and then also really think about what it means to render complexity and to recover from a gross oversight. So without going any further, I think I'll pass on to Anna-Alix Koffi.
Okay, bonsoir. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being with you tonight. So I am Anna-Alix Koffi. I've been producing publication about art these past 10 years. I am also consultant for individuals or companies. I relocated myself in Abidjan 2 years ago because to me it is crucial to also speak from the continent. So Neri and I came up with the idea of this topic of cultural exchanges between private-run spaces or institutions in Africa, because I am myself opening something, an art center dedicated to video art and digital art in Abidjan the next month. We were discussing, Neri and I, what something could bring to a wider conversation, how it could be linked to different existing initiatives in Africa, how we could all cope with daily life difficulties. There are a lot of conversations that are being held independently. The real success will be to have this crucial conversation all together. I am ready for the images. So we decided to set a panel for this year edition of the forum. We asked Heba El-Lakal, an independent curator and a researcher focusing on modern and contemporary Middle Eastern art, to moderate. Discussing with her, the title came, Coming Closer Together, Intracultural African Art Exchanges and Artists Foundation. The panelists were Roger Ballen, artist and founder Inside Out Center of the Arts South Africa, Ibrahim Mahama, artist and founder Savannah Center for Contemporary Art in Ghana, Muataz Nasreddin, artist and founder Darb 1718 Egyptian Contemporary Art and Culture Center in Egypt, Karen Monica Rainey, curator, Lusaka Contemporary Art Center, Lukak in Zambia, and Belinda Alden, director at Yinka Shonibare Foundation, UK and Nigeria. The panel, presented in collaboration with Something We Africans Got, the journal that I published, was held the morning of the second day. From the panel that you can now watch online, we understood that the funding is a main difficulty. The different approaches were fundraising, private money, or the individual funders, or money for the patron. And this one is harder because it takes a great amount of time to engage with people, explain to them what to do. It takes a long for them to have faith, to believe, to support, and to continue to give. Because it's not enough to give one time. They have to continuously give to build a sustainable support patronage based. Muataz Nasreddin rose among other complexities, the difficulties to find employees. I'll quote him, people start working there, get more skills, and then leave because they find better position. So you have to start all over again. But on a more positive note, we could listen during the panel a wide range of point of views, and always the will to impulse changes from independent initiatives. More and more artists and art advocates are taking actions in several places in Africa and in the Black world to promote art and critical thinking in order to build bridges with the global conversation. Despite the lack of money, giving up the cause is not an option. I'll finish by quoting Heba, the moderator. What is interesting is that there were so many business cards swept after the talk that I truly believe that we have started a conversation, borrowing ideas from everyone's experiences or program. People were listening to what the other person were doing to get a sense of what could be done in their own foundation. I am myself going to suggest, he said, to my artists in Egypt to apply in the Yinka Shonibare Foundation. So I had a great experience to prepare this panel with African Artists Forum in Venice. This was great because I really think we can go further, and I'm sure that next edition will be more packed than it was already this year, and the conversation will continue. So now I pass the word to Lebohang.
I will unmute myself. But good evening, everyone. So I am Lebohang Kganye, a visual artist from Johannesburg, South Africa. I participated for the first time in the AAVF talks and met Neri for the first time and some of the panelists that I was on the talk with. And that included Georgiana Ward-Booth, Janine Sisma, Raquel van Haver, and Ayana V. Jackson. And for me, I think as an artist that had been thinking for quite some time around independent practice, but also around sort of leadership in the art and what that looks like and what that means, especially as a woman from the continent, this conversation could not have come at a greater time. First of all, as an artist that was representing, or not representing, but an artist that was present or showing work at the South African Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and then also in conversation with other female creatives that, where we were all discussing things around mentorship and what that looks like for you as a creative or you as a woman practitioner, and also sort of independent practices and what it looks like to formulate a structure within your practice that works for you. And so the conversation was delved into different ways of sort of creating structures and creating organizations, and really building new kinds of institutions and new ways of working, or really thinking through not alternative ways of working, but different ways of working that were healthy ways of working, that where you could formulate a structure or support that worked for how you work. And so with with the sort of conversations that we touched on, I would imagine that as the conversations continue tonight, that we would be able to delve into it and also into the sort of work that I make. But my practice is mainly centered around oral histories and how oral history has a close relationship to photography. And literature and theater form or inspire the sort of photographic works that I make. And I would imagine that we would engage more on that as we continue the conversation. So I will hand it over.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to invite the panelists to please turn on their cameras so we can start off our conversation. And Ilaria, Justin, thank you very much. Alex and Lebohang, fantastic. I would like to kick off the conversation by asking the panelists, how did your participation and presence at the Venice Biennale last week, and as well as at the African Art, in Venice Forum, advance your practice and knowledge, and what was your takeaway? Any of you can start off and tell us about your experience that happened last week. Yes, Alex.
It's always very refreshing. I mean, it's going to be to Venice. It's always an experience. And after all this lockdown and the fact that we weren't seeing each other for maybe almost 3 years for some, it was very exciting to see live coming back again. And all the art and also the interest. And when we see the result of this Biennale, you just, as a Black woman or as anybody, I think you just want to cry. And about the forum, I mean, always a pleasure. I've been following the forum since the beginning. And I mean, participating, it's always an honor because Venice is the most important Biennale, as everybody knows. And having a discussion about African art or Black art there, it's very significative. Sorry, I'm speaking French now. And yeah, I mean, also the quality of the exchange. I think people, you can feel the urge of talking again together, and it leads to, as I said before, to open new conversation and to keep going on. And my wish will be that the forum could last longer, but also we have to see everything, so it could be difficult to be held on the room, but still.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think what happened is that, you're 2 days and there's thousands of things to see and people to meet and everything. And I think what we try to really achieve with the forum is really kind of create a home and a meeting point for a lot of us who are from these backgrounds and practices in terms of like how we share our knowledge and our practice, and as well to network. I would love for Lebohang to tell us as well about her experience at the Venice Biennale, for her to be able to show your work there, but also be present with us at the forum. Tell us, how was your experience for you for the first time to be there and to show, and how was the audience takeaway as well for, you know, your wonderful work to be shown there?
So I actually showed one of my earliest bodies of work, which is entitled Black to Fairy Tales. And I mean, I imagine, well, not I imagine, there was quite a lot of anxiety from my end, you know, as it made sense to me as to why it was important to, for my participation to sort of be about this work, where actually a lot of my later bodies of work have stemmed from all of these, from this work basically, and the themes that this work touches on, which is around literature and how literature migrates to other contexts. So with this work, it looks at Western fairy tales and Western literature within the context of Africa, and how you know that literature becomes part of the education system. And it becomes sort of these grand narratives that as children we sort of identify with, and so, you know, and so with that work, I basically went back to the origins of some of these Western fairy tales, or Disney's versions of these fairy tales, and then looked at the original stories, which were the German Grimm brothers, and then contrasted that with African literature or African folklore. And so that's really what the work that I showed at the Venice Biennale was about. But also our participation this year was with three artists. So it's myself, and it's Roger Bellin and Phumlani Nduli. And so when you go into the space, you have a very different experience, you know, because it is these three shows that sort of speak to each other around sort of fantasy and memory, but also sort of personal narrative and personal narration. And so I think for that show to then also be happening in a time when the curator Cecilia had you know was the director for this year's Biennale, I feel extremely honored. And also I think for the conversation, for me to have participated in a conversation with the women that I sat alongside for the AAVF was an extreme honor, because the conversations were really valuable in terms of how we're thinking through sort of creative practice at this point. And really building institutions. And I think that that's really at the center of what I think most sort of practitioners from Africa are thinking about. It's how do we create new kinds of institutions, and what are those institutions about, and how do they have structures that have a sort of long-term support and a meaningful and impactful support for other creatives beyond ourselves. I think I gave you a mouthful.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's very wonderful. I would also like, well, if Justin, you have any kind of thoughts to share, that would be wonderful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in my case, I always feel really spoiled when I get into the environment of the African Art Venice Forum, because I think that just the rigor, the warmth, the generosity that is in the conversation is really remarkable. And you know, being based in Italy for the past 23 years, it's extremely rare that these conversations come to Italy. And so I'm always thrilled to be in an environment that I live in, surrounded by these forms of exchange that are so crucial I think to our survival as artists, really. So for me, that's really, it's a lot about how important coming together in these spaces is. And the opportunity to do so, of course, in the context of Venice is so particular because it brings a lot of people together. Like that event brings people together. And so I think it's really in keeping also with the way that we work to really think about what it means for all these different realities to show up in a singular place, and for us to shape the reality that we want to be a part of by coming together. So for me, it's always an incredibly powerful experience and truly an honor.
That's wonderful. I love that you're talking about that. And I think all of the three of you, the way that you work in a very kind of context, with Alix, with publishing, and of course, creating new spaces for video art in Abidjan, Lebohang with your work in photography, installation, and film in Johannesburg, and of course, for you, Justin, as a practitioner, yes, as an artist, but also a cultural practitioner for Black History Month, Florence and such. So you all work in a different spaces and very different kind of mediums, and you use different tools separately. How is it when you do go to Venice and you congregate and you share? How is it kind of going back, right? What is the takeaway of you going back? I know it takes some time to readjust to, going from an island in Venice and then back to your own spaces. I know for you, Justin, it's not really that far. But at the same time, there's a shift that happens. There's an energy that you come and bring in, and there's also an energy that you take out. I would love to hear about how these kind of, shared experience and the energies that you bring in and take out has shaped you and maybe your work, and also influenced maybe your future projects. Yeah. It's a loaded question, isn't it?
But to me, I think I feel always I have candid answers because I feel like a child each time I relate it to my work or what I do. I think I'm lucky to be passionate, as everybody's here, and super important to cope to resist, because it's very difficult. So what we get in Venice is a lot of inspiration. You get a boost seeing all those people inspired, passionate by what they do, raising very important questions, having a lot of conversation. So you take it with you, you process, and you try to make something out of it in where you live. You take to bring the Venice experience for my experience to the place where I'm going to build, and try to bring also those kind of conversation with the people around you where you live. So they weren't in Venice, but thanks to you, you bring something that you heard and you ask them, and then you try to start to keep the conversation going on wherever you are.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, it takes, that kind of courage, right? And sometimes we feel like we're really working and living and practicing in a very kind of meta space, right? And I think most of you work very much in different communities, they're inspired by different communities and different kind of realities as well. I would really love to hear more about like the audience and how that changes the audience that you have in Venice, and how that audience also shifts and changes the one that you have back in your own context with the work and the practice that you do. Lebohang, I would love to hear from
you. So I was just coming back to the word that you, or the statement that you made, that it is quite a brave act to sort of participate or take part on these platforms, and I think it really is that. I was having a conversation with Anna on one of the evenings as we were in Venice, and just speaking about how proud I am about her publication, Something We Africans Got, and Off the Wall. And I was just, and I think because of the sort of the bravery to start something, but also the bravery to see it through, is, I think it's something that I think we aren't we aren't patting each other on the backs enough for, because it takes a lot. And it also takes a lot because there's actually half the time not enough sort of financial support, or like, you know, you are the only one that's willing to take the risk, or you are the only one that really believes in this vision. You know, and I think that there's many initiatives. I don't know if that's even the right, if that's even the right word or phrase to use, but there are many important steps that we are taking as practitioners, or other practitioners are taking, that I think that even without any sort of financial involvement, that I do think that sort of knowing that other practitioners believe and, you know, are interested in being part of this vision in sort of different ways is the thing that sort of allows us to be able to build long-term initiatives. And I suppose that also in a time of coming to Venice like this, post the pandemic, you know, where I think every one of us has had to sort of think through their practice in different ways and really make a decision whether you're doing this thing or not. Am I being an artist or not? There's probably another way to do life, you know. That I think in you know, coming to Venice, I think in a moment where all of us have had, you know, that sort of realizational moments where you really have to question yourself about what it is that you're doing and how important it is, not just to you, but the sort of legacies that we're going to leave behind. And so I think coming to Venice in that moment where also I'm clear about how I want to exist even in my sort of South African context, and the sort of work that I want to do in that context, and the sort of relationships that I want to build, and the different ways of working that I'm interested in. Venice was just that moment that sort of comes as I've had those conversations with myself. And so I think there's so much more to take back with me for my practice in South Africa, which is not just situated in the sort of South African space. I mean, I have a sort of a global practice, but I'm working from South Africa, and the work is about South Africa. But this could not have come at a better moment, I think, for me, because I've asked myself so many questions around what I do and how important it is for me, and how I want to continue having survived the pandemic.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, go ahead, Neri.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I mean, I was just like noticing that we have like two interesting questions that the audience is sending us, and in the specific, there's one question that is more for the artists. So I mean, I guess like Lebo and Justin can answer to this. What are the most difficult challenges these artists face in presenting their art to an international audience, and what kinds of assistance have helped them to develop an international profile? This is going to be difficult though. Just, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think, you know, really listening also just in this conversation, I'm really extremely happy of all the things that have been touched on, because I think a lot of the work that I see, in a certain sense, looking at the African Art and Venice Forum, you're looking at the importance of dreaming beyond our means, right? Because I think a lot of times, a lot of things that relate to exhibiting in an international platform is being sure that you're thinking beyond what you actually have. And that's something that is not so natural. We're not naturally inclined to do that necessarily. I think it's more that as artists, you know, who are maybe anchored in the understanding that we have the capacity to recalibrate value, social value and economic value and everything, it pushes us to sort of think that the narration is not the narration, right? There's more. The funding is not the funding, there's more. And sort of to really imagine that what we can do is actually not just what we are doing. And I think that the power of like being in a room and sharing those stories is a way in which we kind of start to understand that the struggle for funding, the struggle in relation to infrastructure is consistent no matter where we are. And really seeing that is actually really empowering, because it sort of helps us. We're in a room where we're all talking about this, yet we're all recognizing our agency. And so recognizing that agency talks about how much power is in that room. And so I think that really, addressing and really thinking about an international audience is first and foremost for me about really two things: specificity and positionality. It's really thinking about how specific are we being, how anchored are we into the realities in which we live, in which surround us, because those are the things that actually speak above and beyond anything that could be termed international.
Fantastic. Thank you. Actually, is Lebohang, maybe Lebohang wants to say something about it? Or I have another question actually also. And it's more related to the capacity of the forum, and it's very interesting. Maybe Ilaria can say something about it, or Azza. What opportunities can the forum create for transnational dialogue between artists from the continent of Africa and its vast diaspora? So the question of nationhood is central to the historical context of the Venice Biennale. So how does the forum create a space for the specificity of the condition of Black artistic practices in the world?
This is an actual wonderful question. I'm very happy to take it. I'm very happy that it arrived, because as my colleagues from the forum know, is something that we're all very concerned with. I'm very interested in, and I try to push always as we think about the programming and how we can move forward with the forum. I think that one element that is very important is that, as we've discussed so far, the type of approach that the forum develops is one that is more thematic. It is sort of, each panel is centered around certain questions or urgencies, precisely to sort of step away, with the exception of the focus sections, which are countries that might not have had really necessarily a degree of visibility in the context of Venice, but to step away from this notion of the nation state and nationhood per se, because it is highly problematic. On the other hand, we've been trying to really cultivate more this trans-regional approach, of course, as we were saying just now, this year, focusing also on the work that the recovery plan and Justin have been doing in Italy, but also in past editions, I think about other very interesting panels that we had about cross residencies between Congo and Cuba. And really moving forward, the hope is really to think about, again, a forum that, yes, it's called African Art in Venice Forum, but it's really about Afro-descendant art in its multiple understandings and sort of tentacular ways of thinking. And the last thing I want to say about this is also that the forum, like every organization, and especially organizations like this that are in a certain way grassroots, meaning they come from a group that works pro bono, that doesn't bring with huge funds, huge resources right off the bat, but really builds those resources over time, is in a specific moment of its life. It's an organism. So right now we are at a point in which we've been trying to catalyze attention and work with a lot of partners that are present in Venice, but also for the future, really in order to cultivate these trans-regional connections. The hope is to be able to bring more and more artists, practitioners, and speakers that would not necessarily be in Venice. And that, of course, requires more infrastructural development and resource development. But the bottom line is also to really have this diagonal approach to what it means to have a forum of this kind in the context of Venice, and bring voices that might not necessarily be able to access the privilege that it is being in Venice, and especially being in Venice during the opening week of the Biennale.
There's someone asking us, like, thanks for actually thanking us. Thanks for sharing your experience. What are the pipelines for artists and art institutions to and from the forum? How are these discussions replicated on the continent and in the diaspora? Which is another very interesting question. So you may want to answer, Ilaria or Azza. Azza, do you feel like?
Azza, do you want to take it for the sake of alternance?
Sure. Yeah, I think what happens is that the way that we have worked and the way that we have always wanted to create a dialogue and a conversation is pretty much seeing what is kind of artistic practices are there and how can they have a very kind of transparent and an ethical and as well a collaborative approach. So with the artists and with the work that we're doing, it's very much kind of to create that network. I hope I've answered the question correctly. Yeah.
Yes. Plus, I would say there is like we have the content partnership and the way we work with several stakeholders from different museums and foundations helps us like kind of a filtering also like for quality of content and this really it's a project that is all based on cooperation, and you can see it also in the way we try to involve many voices and have like the most assistance like from different parts of the world, I would say. And there's a last question, actually, if we can make it. Can you define the recovery plan? This is for you, Justin.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that the notion of the recovery plan was born from looking at what it means to safeguard archives and the need for creating a plan in the case of some unforeseen disaster. And in really thinking about the archive in relation to people of African descent as one that always has this disaster that's forthcoming. In the context of Italy, that archive is one that will be overlooked, that will be under-considered, and you know, what it means to sort of recover the fragments of history that have been overlooked and under-considered, and also to recover from the impact that that has on a society. So those are really the things there. And I would just add that in relation to the pipeline and replications, I mean, I know that with our work, we're really inspired by everything that African Art and Venice Forum is doing. And we develop a lot of forms of collaboration and exchange that really overlap in a lot of ways with that, including research residencies dedicated to young artists that are based in Italy and others. So yeah, those things are certainly replicating across the diaspora, as is true also in some of the narrations that were present in other panels.
Well, thank you all so very much. We are out of time, but I just so appreciated that you guys all joined us today to share with our Fowler audiences just a little taste of the beauty of the African Art in Venice Forum. You know, space making in such a way is one of the most impactful ways to increase representation. And this work is so imperative. So thank you all for making it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bianca. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone who joined us. This program's been recorded. It's going to be available immediately on the Fowler Facebook, and in a few days it'll be uploaded to our Instagram and onto our website for you to revisit and share. I'm sure AAVF will be sharing it as well. We hope that you'll join us for our next program. It's actually happening tonight at the Fowler. We've got a mariachi performance. Details can be found on the closing slide. In the meantime, we hope that you have a great evening or day wherever you are. See you next time. Bye.